So, if you would, please join me in a warm welcome to John McCready.
I want to thank you right from the outset. Thank you for your courage. This is going to require courage on this talk. And that's a capital C. And I also want to thank you for your willingness, your presence, and your participation. As I said, I'm going to deliver a talk and a reading. I've been guided and supported to assemble and deliver this talk, and this is its maiden journey, into churches, synagogues, and mosques. I think you'll understand when it all wraps up why I was guided to do that. This is that moment. This is that launch. Now, let's roll is in the human psyche. We certainly recall it around 9/11. And those are courageous words, and courageous actions are embedded in the human psyche when faced with an against all odds moment. The talk is body, mind, spirit, evolution. But then I want to point out that there are times in our history, in our journey, that we have to take an R and we have to dust it off. And we have to put it in front of revolution. By that simple act of adding the R, we add ourselves in with intention, participation, and mindfully being. It starts with the individual contributing to the collective consciousness and being an active witness to our connection, to our unity, to our oneness, to our interconnection, and to our interdependence. As part of this revolution that's underway, and it's global, there's a regeneration, there is a renewal, there is a rejuvenation. My natural state of being is health and wellness. Your natural state of being is health and wellness. Hold on to that. You have stripped off the old self with its practices and clothed yourself with the new self according to the image of its creator. Colossians 3:9-10. I am not original. Every time I go to speak, that'll be a slide that'll be right up front. I am not original. Because there's a tendency, a human tendency, to take credit for things. And in so doing, we separate ourselves out from a stream of consciousness. In the beginning was the Word. I am not original. In that knowing, I honor all who have contributed to this inquiry. I am also deeply grateful to all who move this inquiry forward. In the beginning was the Word, the declaration of divine order, divine love, divine intelligence, divine design. I'm not original honors the collective contributions and our interconnectedness. All is connected. No one thing can change by itself. In this inquiry, body, mind, spirit revolution, the overarching exploration is our shared awareness and agreement that we are one. Unfortunately, Our knowledge, our knowingness, does not translate into being what we know, that we are one, interconnected, and interdependent. Instead, we live lives disconnected and in direct conflict with divine order, divine love, divine intelligence, divine design. Disconnection and corresponding actions has now led us to this precipice and the potential extinction of human biology and animal biology. We are losing the ability to procreate as a species. 1 in 3 males in the US are now sterile. 1 in 4 women in the US are infertile. 50% drop in sperm count in the last 20 years. And on our current trajectory, we have about 70 years left of human life on Earth. We are in the 6th great extinction on the planet right now. Earth is losing 1 species to the point of extinction every 20 minutes. We've lost 40% of the Earth's biodiversity in the last 50 years. We are pushing our bee population to the point of extinction. The 5th great extinction occurred about 65 million years ago with the extinction of the dinosaurs. Already, always listening. Let's explore and create a distinctive way of listening. From the outset, before we venture into exploring our disconnection and the power and possibility of being the oneness, the interconnectedness we know ourselves to be, let us explore and distinguish already, always listening. The sum total of my opinions, interpretations, ascribed meanings, certainties, positions, beliefs, concepts, and what I already know to be true constitute my already, always listening. I already know how things will go from then on. The already, always listening, it drowns out newness, generosity, and possibility. So my request is that we listen to instead of listening from. If we're able to make that shift, we will be able to hear something for the first time and open ourselves to the possibilities that abound in each and every conversation and every moment. The why, the passion, the purpose, the journey. I want to create a context for you. Joe touched a little on it. As to why I'm sitting here at this moment, and this moment is unfolding. I find my life to be a continuous calling to wake up to the divine order and universal truths. Waking up to the divine design inside and outside. At times, I experience a knowingness, often in advance of being able to fully articulate what I've been called to know, embrace, and manifest. Early on in life, I had this sense of adventure and discovery of life. I still do. I also had an awareness of a guiding presence in my life, greater than I knew myself to be. My father and mother were deeply steeped in their faith. My father, a well-known evangelical preacher, traveled throughout Canada and United States. My father and mother were especially interested and committed to sharing a message to the downtrodden, to those who lived on the streets, the homeless. As a child, quite often I was removed from my bed late at night, taken to my parents' room so that my bed would be shared with the person from Skid Row. I witnessed transformation in people's lives and experienced love and compassion and the possibility that everyone could change and rise above their circumstances. I was also witness to my father as a powerful public orator, addressing crowds in the hundreds and thousands, and people transforming. Then, at 80 years of age, Dad was diagnosed with dementia that advanced quickly. Dad's life and his presence, as he had known it and I had experienced it, vanished. He died when his neuron signals misfired while he was eating. Deaths due to Alzheimer's have increased by nearly 87% in the last decade. The next decade could even be worse. 10% of people over the age of 65, develop some form of dementia. And people over the age of 85 have a 50% chance of developing this disease. In 2015 alone, caregivers provided an estimated 18 billion hours of unpaid care. The demands of this disease could crash not only our healthcare system, but our entire financial system. These health and well-being challenges today are to a great extent preventable. If Dad had known and acted on what I know today, at least Dad would have had a choice and a chance. Another key influence and hero in my life occurred when I was 14 years old. With my parents' blessings, I was guided to join another family. A highly artistic, highly educated, steeped in science and the arts, and a caring, loving family. Our home was a 100-acre wildlife research farm. Yanka, my second mother, had made it her life mission to rescue young, suffering souls that aspired to find their wings and fly. Yanka, when she was 19 years old, was working in the Dutch underground movement against the Nazis. She was captured, tortured, and sexually abused. Overall, she ended up hating men, but found a way to love life. At Yanka's memorial, I wrote and delivered the following to honor Yanka and express my commitment to helping others who are in need. And I will share that with you. It's a big part of my why. It's a big part of my passion. It's a big part of my purpose. It's titled, I Remember You, a memory that will never fade. I remember you, Yanka. I tasted your gifts. I felt your interest in my well-being. I saw your inspired expressions on my plate. Yanka was an artist. I sat many times within your richly textured rooms you tended to daily. I drank your coffee, and I can still feel the grains on my tongue. I remember you, Yanka, that with clarity that matches truth. Even though adventures have taken me away, great distances and a lot of time has scurried away, my experience of you has never faded. I sensed your loneliness at times and wondered if you ever doubted your contributions. I stand here today with no doubt that your contributions to my life were timely, meant to be, unmatched in its impact, and your nourishments have always been part of my daily meals. I remember you, Yanka. I can never forget you, Yanka. You awakened my tethered spirit, burdened by those who did not believe in me or felt that I was capable of something narrowly defined. Oh yes, Yanka, I remember you. You carried on your underground work throughout your life, understanding so clearly the journey of the tortured soul, The childlike spirit so often denied a voice and the opportunity to dance lightly with joy. And the frightened spirit abandoned by the many tangible faces. Yanka, you created a nest for me and an opportunity to discover my wings, encouraged me to fly, made sure when it was time that I left the nest. You planted in my heart a homing device that would allow me to always return to the nest if I ever needed or wanted to. Yanka, I was reminded of you recently by another precious soul in my life. We've been friends for years. With gracious courage, he said to me, a number of years ago, you let me down. You did not believe in me. The root, the foundation of our friendship was born out of our belief and support of each other, and it always will be. I cried inside at that moment, realizing that I had embodied fear as my friend and had suspended my belief and support in him. Yanka, today, I cannot say to you, a number of years ago you let me down, you did not believe in me. Yes, Yanka, I will always remember you. You believed in me and never stopped believing in me. Listen, belief in someone, celebrating and supporting is magical juice. The highest honor I can bestow you is to share those gifts you gave me. I remember you, Yanka. Now a collage of memories. Memories that will never fade. Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. Many great souls and teachers I've been blessed with. The bird in Hiroshima. What we do not see. What we do not listen to. What we do not honor. What does it take? What does it take to become aware of the miracle, the amazing gift, the inner garden in all of us? What does it take to awaken to our interconnectedness to everything? So you remember, when I came into this life, I came in with intense curiosity and adventure. So in my teen years, I don't know what drug I didn't try. One that fascinated me was amphetamine. And when I would take amphetamine and put it in a syringe and mainline it, in seconds I would feel a constriction in my throat and my head would get blasted off. And I would talk endlessly for 5 to 7 hours, if you can fathom that. And so I took myself, I was living in Guelph, and I took myself up to the University of Guelph and I went into the chemistry department. And I found a professor, Dr. DeWright. And I said what I just said to you. And he was gracious. He said, I would like you to come to my home. And I did. And I sat down. And he said the following. He said, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to become a bird, and I want you to fly over to Hiroshima. And when you get there, I want you to look down. And when you're there, tell me, Dr. DeWright, I'm there. What do you see? I see an incredible amount of green. I see movement. I see this whole orderly flow of traffic and people. And he said, okay, now I'm going to drop the bomb. What do you see now? I said, well, Dr. DeWright, I don't see a single thing I saw before. And not only that, I see this chaos. I see this immense movement of energy. He said, yes, open your eyes. So I opened my eyes. And he said, look, I want you to go out to the garage. And there's a propane torch there. And I want you to bring the torch in, and I want you to light it, and I want you to start burning some of the walls of my home. I said, well, no, Dr. Durag, I'm not going to do that, and I have a sense of what you're saying. So, you know, in life, I never know when that shift is. I never know when that transformational moment is. But that was the moment. My trajectory changed. I became aware of this amazing society in me. I became aware later on about this incredible garden in me. Man does not weave this web of life. He is merely a strand of it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. Chief Seattle. Our awakening contributes to collective awakening. Robert Brummett, a teacher, a writer, spiritual luminary, about 16 months ago in this sanctuary right next to us, I'm sitting there like I do in the 11:25 service, listening, and he's guest speaker, and he suddenly says, divine intelligence is impregnated within all of the plants and trees we see outside this sanctuary. Suddenly, I felt my body sit up, and I heard with urgency that I was to take on a project. And I simply said yes. I didn't know what that project was, but I sensed the urgency. That project became, and is, Reclaimed Trilogy. About 8 months ago, I received another request, twofold. One was, I was to assemble a talk, and here we are. And I am to go into churches and synagogues and mosques and wherever anybody invites me to go and deliver this talk. And the other request was, of the Reclaimed Trilogy, one of the trilogies, The Village. I want you to open The Village, which was opened on September the 12th. And I won't go into that now, but that was the other request. So all this time, I have been downloading. I have been so divinely blessed. And there's an example present in this room, that Tommy was here at this time to film this. Tommy lives in Sweden. Tommy's a dear friend. I'm selfish. This deep-rooted purpose I said yes to is the shared primal instinct all living beings have in common, the drive to survive and thrive. I awoke to the dramatic rise and epidemic of chronic and autoimmune diseases and obesity. I awoke to the proliferation of pills for ills. I awoke to a decline in loving, caring, supportive communities, to a dramatic rise in isolation and loneliness. I awoke to losing friends way too early to preventable diseases. Our current generation will potentially be the first generation in human history to not live as long as their parents. I awoke to the divine order, divine love, divine intelligence, divine design. We are involved in the largest uncontrolled human and Mother Earth experiment in history. We did not sign up. We were signed up. We did not agree. We were not asked. This does not honor our American values. This does not honor our human values. 100 years ago, we were beginning to destroy the topsoil within the United States. We were failing to do crop rotations, composting, these age-old practices. That contributed to the Dust Bowl. That started in the 1920s. It dovetailed with the Great Depression. This led to wiping out crops, and famine happened in the United States. America pulled itself out of depression largely because of a wind-up for the petroleum industry and the big manufacturing industry that would create the biggest war machine ever seen. A massive demand for petroleum for the tanks, ships, and planes were built. And then suddenly, World War II ended, and suddenly there was a glut of petroleum. The industry needed a new target. It did not take the industry long to realize that in petroleum is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, three of the most critical macronutrients for crops. The industry repurposed itself, and instead of tanks, ships, and planes, they started to make chemical petroleum-based fertilizers and put that into the soils. This led to what was termed the Green Revolution. Suddenly, we took dead crops and failing fields with no productivity to huge fields of green corn, soybean, and all the rest growing in abundance in the 50s and the 1960s. This approach had already been observed in human health, and just like we did in plant health. By using just a couple of nutrients and steal or remove many of the others from the food chain, you end up with a weak immune system. The plants started to fail. The crops started to be prone to insects, fungi, and viruses. Instead of asking, why is the health of the plants failing? We went to the chemical industry and asked them what they could do about the situation. Well, the chemical industry was keen to introduce chemical herbicides and pesticides to kill the weeds, bugs, and everything else. By the 1970s, this became very large, and the interplay between the war machine and our food was still at play. The war in Vietnam really defined the chemical industry's ability to kill our plants. Agent Orange was created and introduced. Its purpose was to kill the jungle, to defoliate the trees so we could see the Viet Cong. Defoliation became a huge industry. Monsanto and some of the other big chemical companies got into the industry of killing plants, and then Vietnam was over. What were they going to do with these chemicals? Shifting from a war on humans to a war on plants and weeds, or bugs and weeds, they found a perfect business model. People do not like to weed. They came up with a convenience-based chemical solution where you no longer had to bend over to pull a weed out of the ground. You just walk around and shoot these weeds and wipe them out. Roundup. Convenience started to become a pervasive marketing mantra adopted by the convenience chemical-based food chain, takeout and fast food chains. That really set the stage for the GMO, God move over era. It also set the culture for this war on the outside world, or germs, which has a strong co-relationship to how allopathic medicine is practiced. Everything is antimicrobial. Antimicrobial hand wipes and countertops wipe, creating a monoculture and wiping out biodiversity, which is threatening our health. Just like we do with antibiotics, you always need something better. One of the observable truths about biology and nature is it will always find a loophole. If you try to put up an unnatural blockade, an antibiotic or an herbicide or a pesticide, nature's going to find a way through there. That is perhaps contrary to man's purpose. To grow 1 million acres of a single crop of corn, monoculture, That's not nature's approach. As a result, they began to see the emergence of weeds that were resistant to a lot of these chemicals that had been developed in the 1950s and 60s. In the 1970s, Monsanto changed course with the development of organophosphates. They found glyphosate, which became the active ingredient in Roundup, probably the single most successful selling herbicide in the history of the industry. One of the unnerving features of this toxin that Monsanto created is it's water soluble. Nature makes the vast majority of its toxins in the form of a lipid or fat soluble toxin. That's important because these toxins can be sequestered away by the mycelium in the soil by the fungi, or it can be sequestered away by our fat cells so it's not in our bloodstream to be exposed to our brain and other things. Fat-soluble toxins are nature's approach. Water-soluble toxins are man's approach. Once you dump this water-soluble toxin into the environment, it's going to go into the water table. It actually evaporates and goes into the air, ends up in the clouds, and rains back on us. We have created this whole ecosystem of toxicity. Monsanto's first patent with glyphosate was really its use as an antibiotic, not as a weed killer. This is interesting. Since they knew and understood what this toxin was doing to biology, even though they continue to claim, that it does not have any human biological toxicity to it, they have seen that everything that it touches, whether a plant or a bug, it kills. How it kills is it blocks the ability of the enzyme pathway, which is called the shikimate pathway. These enzymes make our ringed aromatic amino acids. What they continue to point out from a marketing standpoint is that since humans do not have this shikimate pathway, there is not a target for glyphosate in humans. However, what is that enzyme pathway and what does it do? It makes the essential amino acids. The amino acids that the body cannot manufacture. The amino acids are basic building blocks. With glyphosate, 4 of those amino acids, at least half of them are now taken out and no longer available in the plant sprayed by glyphosate. We rely on that plant or that bacteria to deliver those essential amino acids that we cannot manufacture. So we have been robbed of a subset of the alphabet. So imagine we woke up one morning and headed to work, and we can only use 19 of the 26 letters. How well would our communication go? In the 1970s, Monsanto got approval from the EPA to utilize glyphosate for farming. Monsanto submitted all of their own science of safety, and EPA never asked for third-party safety analysis. They started selling this new weed killer to farmers that was very effective. The sales began to plateau in the 1980s. They then sought approval for direct-to-consumer market with Roundup, and sales took off again. By the 1990s, with the consumer market sales beginning to taper off, tons of glyphosate was getting into our water systems. With consumer use only, 0.1%, that's 1,000th of a percent of glyphosate or Roundup that's sprayed worldwide, actually hits the target. The rest runs off into our water system. By 1992, Monsanto needed a new niche. Farmers were not using enough Roundup because every plant that it kills, every plant that it touches, it kills. So they were spot spraying around the borders of their fields. In 1992, Monsanto went to the farmers and said that they had amazing new chemical. For them, It's a desiccant. To dry up, dehydrate. Instead of calling it a weed killer, they called it a drying agent. This was very attractive to northern wheat growers in the United States. Wheat had not only had to mature, go to seed, and dry. It needs to be dry for a period of time and then cut and then lay dry for a couple of days before it can be harvested effectively. If at any point in there it gets wet, you have to wait for it to dry again. Monsanto told the farmers that they could take their whole crop and spray it with Roundup. Then they could harvest these 3 days later. It would be dead, dried up, and they could harvest early. In the southern areas of the United States, using Roundup, they could grow 2 crops instead of 1 crop in a single growing season. In 1992, this is the first time glyphosate had actually been applied to a food item right before it was harvested. Unknowingly, as consumers, farmers perhaps, what we were doing is adding glyphosate, which would become a chemical that had a very synergistic effect with gluten. So we actually created gluten sensitivity out of this one effect. Gluten's been in our diet for thousands of years without a problem. Suddenly, in the 1990s, this was the beginning phase of celiac disease, which is the autoimmune condition to gluten. A huge realization occurred that so many people were becoming gluten sensitive. People began experiencing bloating, fatigue, brain fog, poor sex drive, infertility, insulin resistance. Take gluten out of their diet and people got better. This was early in the 1990s. Now let's fast forward 20 years. With the wheat treated with glyphosate, suddenly we have somewhere around 18 million people in the United States alone that are being diagnosed with celiac, and probably 10 times that many that are gluten sensitive and do not know yet. Suddenly it was like 100 to 1,000 more volume to a single farmer. Monsanto then wanted to figure out a way to spray every food crop with glyphosate. Their scientists explored the possibility of spraying corn, soybean, and all of the staple crops, not just wheat. GMO, or genetically modified organism, or God move over. It became necessary because the chemical glyphosate will kill soybean or any plant you spray it on. They came up with a genetic modification. Here's what they did. They did this through an amino acid switch so that the plant that normally would be killed by the toxin would no longer respond to the poison. So now they have corn or soybean, all of the staple crops, also salmon. They changed that one amino acid in there, and it is enough to change the structure of that so that it's not directly affected by the glyphosate. At this time in history, 2 things occurred for the first time: the introduction of GMOs and the patenting and ownership of the seeds. Up to this time and throughout history, farmers would not sell 10% of their crop. They would just turn their own seeds and would plant out the following year. The farmers, who now no longer owned the intellectual property, would become indentured servants to Monsanto. And with GMO plants, they could substantially increase the sale of glyphosate. From just a few plants, test plants in 1996, or test fields, to 10 years later, they owned 95% of the soybean industry, 85% of the corn industry. In 10 years, they took over the entire industry. Last year, 2 billion kilograms of glyphosate were used worldwide. 2 billion kilograms of a single chemical that will rob our soil of its nutrient and medicinal qualities, which would fail the plant's health, which would demand more chemical, herbicide, pesticide, and more pharmaceutical management of those crops. 2 billion kilograms of a water-soluble toxin. What does this mean to human health? We all find ourselves witnessing the denials starting to play out like a chapter out of the tobacco industry playbook. In 1994, we saw the CEOs of these massive tobacco companies stand up before Congress, hand on the Bible, and swear that cigarettes were neither causing cancer or addictive. Now, scientists had just presented to Congress 40 years of linear data of this is how cigarettes cause lung cancer. This is how it destroys the immune system. This is how it is causing the problem. We then watched Congress sit back down and not move on that information.
Let me begin my questioning on the matter of whether or not nicotine is addictive. Let me ask you first, and I'd like to just go down the row, whether each of you believes that nicotine is not addictive. I heard virtually all of you touch on it. Just yes or no. Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction. There is no intoxication.
We'll take that as a no, and again, time is short. If you could just, I think each of you believe nicotine is not addictive. We just would like to have this for the record.
I don't believe that nicotine for our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive. I believe that nicotine is not addictive. I believe that nicotine is not addictive. And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
Dr. Campbell, I assume that you're aware that your testimony, and you said in your testimony that nicotine is not addictive, is contradicted by an overwhelming number of authorities and associations. For example, in 1988, the Surgeon General of the United States wrote an entire report on this topic. The Surgeon General, of course, is the chief health advisor to our government. I assume you have reviewed that report?
Yes, I have, sir.
All right.
The short answer is that cigarettes are addicting. The pharmacologic and behavioral processes that determine tobacco addiction are similar to those that determine addiction to drugs such as heroin and cocaine. Now look, just 10 years later, the consumer in America changed. The legislation did not change. The science did not change. But the consumer suddenly realized they did not want emphysema and lung cancer, and they did not want it for their children and grandchildren. Within 10 years, the tobacco industry really collapsed in the United States because the consumer changed. There are 3 things that can't be hidden for long: the sun, the moon, and the truth. We are the solution. What do we know today in terms of the correlationship between the introduction of glyphosate, the introduction of GMOs, the dramatic increased usage of glyphosate and GMOs in our food within the United States, and the dramatic rise in chronic and autoimmune diseases that reached an epidemic level? What do we know? Correlationships are not causation, but then there is common sense. 2 scientists from MIT, Dr. Nancy Swanson and Dr. Stephanie Seneff, compiled all the data and shows a correlationship between, look at this one, autism, 6 to 21 years of age. So the red line is glyphosate applied to corn, and those bars going up is the epidemic rise of autism. Now the correlationship there is close to 99%. Liver and enterohepatic bile duct cancer incident. Now, a couple of new additions there. You'll see that kind of blue line is the genetically engineered corn and soy crops. And then you have that green line that's going across. That's the pre-1990 trend. But that's not what happened. Age-adjusted urinary bladder cancer, thyroid cancer, due to stroke, age-adjusted death due to obesity, age-adjusted death due to intestinal infection. Look at that dramatic rise. That's close to 98%. Age-adjusted death from senile dementia, age-adjusted death from Alzheimer's, age-adjusted death from Parkinson's disease, age-adjusted acute renal failure death, and annual incidence of diabetes. As we start to destroy the soil with this antibiotic, we start to sterilize the soil. We lose the regenerative quality of the soil itself. It can no longer heal itself from the chemical injuries. Green life without nutrient density and diversity has a weakened immune system. In addition, if you throw Roundup in the mix, it's lost its boundaries. Just like we get leaky gut, the plant gets leaky root tubers. And so now they cannot absorb the nutrients they need, so they are in an inflammatory stress state. Now listen closely, because I'm going to take you into some fairly current science. Stressed plants produce stressed fruits and vegetables. We now know the genomics of stressed plant can transfer to the genomics of a stressed out animal consuming it, including us. In other words, if corn, soybean, or the chicken you're eating was stressed out at the moment it was harvested, it puts out genetic information that will modify our genes to create stress in our lives. From our stressed out gut, it is programming our bodies to an immune reaction, a fight or flight stressed out state, genetically producing a stressed out endocrine system in response to food that is nearly dead by the time it is harvested. This programming is done through microRNA. These tiny little messengers from the non-coding gene regions of the plant or animal slaughtered, that goes into our bloodstream. All of this signaling for our genomics now produces who we are today. If this introduction is right, if this information is right, we should see disease everywhere. If we're steeped in this chemical, in our food, in our water, breathing it, raining on us, that would have to have a massive, devastating effect on public health. That should be easily measurable. In fact, it's extremely easy to measure. Autism in children is now 1 in 36. In 1975, it was 1 in 5,000. By 2035, it is projected to be 1 in 3. Attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, 1 in 8 children. Allergies in children, 1 in 4. Anxiety disorders in adults, 1 in 4. Major depression disorders, 1 in 2. Sleep disorders, 1 in 2. Infertility. We've seen a 50% drop in sperm count in Western countries in the last 20 years. Currently, 1 in 4 women, 1 in 4 men are challenged with infertility. Cancer has doubled. Now, this excludes skin cancers from 1990 to present, with the current diagnosis in one's lifetime showing to be 1 in 2 people. Cancer rate in children has multiplied 5 times in just 20 years. MS, 5 times in just 20 years. Celiac disease, 3 times in just 15 years. Parkinson's disease in males and Alzheimer's disease in females, depending on the population reporting, has multiplied 10 to 15 times. Identifying the problem is so much of the solution. We have put into our food chain a chemical that deletes the ability to build a healthy body. We have put into our food chain a chemical that deletes the medicine out of our food. Countries are starting to say they're going to go GMO-free. Russia has announced that they're going to be non-GMO and organic within their food system in 2025. Consumers are starting to say they do not want to be part of this uncontrolled experiment with their health, with the health of their children and grandchildren, and the health of the earth. With tobacco, not everyone smoked. With food, everyone eats. Most people are eating glyphosate, drinking glyphosate, breathing glyphosate, and rained on by glyphosate. Don't be put off by people who know what is not possible. Do what needs to be done and check to see if it was impossible only after you're done. Okay, the most powerful tool we have to change our health, to change our children and grandchildren's health, to change the health of the environment, to change the health of the economy, to literally change our whole world. You ready? It's our fork. Simple but profound. Eat the rainbow. This incredible diversity of micronutrients. Be an artist. Load your plate and fork with colors. Nature's rainbow. What we put on our fork every day, 3 times per day, is the most important decision we have to make. We need to vote with our fork every day. Let's make our vote count for ourselves, our family, and for the earth. Making the transition to a whole plant-based diet may well be the most effective way an individual can stop climate change. Tikat nan. Listen, recent research suggests he's right. Few climate solutions of this magnitude lie in the hands of individuals as close as their fork. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. We cannot eat our way to the divine. We should learn to eat and live in a way that supports the Kundalini, the divine force that we have stored within our bodies, and the cosmic force that permeates all of creation. There are 72,000 nadis throughout our body, channels of our life force, through which the divine force moves. Nadi means flow, pathways of pranic, mental, and spiritual currents, which form a matrix throughout the physical body. They provide energy to every cell and every organ throughout their vast network, carrying prana back and forth in every direction. What is the best diet that helps us turn into a superconductor of the divine and best support a spiritual life? Living foods, raw foods and whole plant-based, seem to best enhance spiritual life, optimizing the flow of the life force. Meat, fish, and dairy block the nadis. If we stop thinking of ourselves as human and start to think of ourselves as a connected biology and to the entirety of Mother Nature, we are going to win the game on a bigger level. We are losing the identity between the outside world and our immune system through the breakdown of the membrane in our digestive tract, resulting in leaky gut. That is literally taking away self-identity from our immune system. So we get autoimmune diseases where we start to react to our own body as if it was foreign. In the same way, at the macro level, we are starting to lose our self-identity as human beings as we start to develop a leaky gut. As we become depressed, panic disorders, we start to get lost down the rabbit hole of doubt, insecurity, fear, guilt. we have a spiritual crisis. We have a relationship crisis that is on an epidemic level equal to cancer and beyond. We are literally losing our self-identity at the cell level because we are eating a chemical that breaks our self-identity at the cell level. A sickness happens and it results in immune reaction and a healing process. I think that is what's happening to our society right now. At best, we are only 10% human. Most people do not know that there are more foreign cells in the human body than the cells we got from our mother and father. Our DNA produces only 22,000 genes, and we have 3.3 million microbial genes in our gut. We have about 150 times more bacterial viral DNA in our bodies than human DNA. Think about this for a second. That means we are at best 10% human. In fact, we are a walking, talking ecosystem, living and connected to this ecosystem we call the universe. We have a sickness and a disease on this planet. Loss of self-identity, human consciousness of our purpose here, only to trigger the ultimate healing process, which is to realize that we're all one, we're all interconnected, and we're interdependent. We are blessed to witness people beginning to change their macro consciousness. As they change their diets, as they change their nutrition, as they get in touch with their food supply, as they put back bacterial and fungal communication networks back into their body, they come back. As the boundaries go up in the gut and at the blood-brain barrier, our macro boundaries, we get in touch with, I am me. I am important. I am loved. I do not need this kind of abuse in my life. I want to share these thoughts absorbed from one of my heroes, Dr. Zach Bush, one of the few triple board certified MDs and founder of Farmer's Footprint. When he was practicing in the intensive care units, he had the privilege of being around humans at the end of life. He was so compelled by these experiences that he ended up getting another subspecialty in hospice and palliative care and dealing with the end of life issues. At the end of life, we call it death. What I've laid out for you today is the possibility of our human species and the death of it in 70 years, 100 years. Who cares? It's rather pathetic. We're looking at the last chapter on Earth with our current course of actions. What has some of Zach's experiences been in those last moments with patients who were dying? So very few humans are now watching this process of death, and it has allowed death to be defined as an endpoint, as a contraction, disappearance, rather than what it actually is, a massive expansion of consciousness, of reality, of awareness, and of love. Zach observed that the most poignant examples of this are people that die biologically. And the medical team spends 15 to 30 minutes in ICU resuscitation with drugs shocking their chest. They have a dismal record of pulling people back. They lose the vast majority of them, 94%. Someone who's biologically dead they have them artificially sustaining life, having them on a respirator, pounding on their chest, compressing and pumping drugs into them to get their heart restarted. The doctor and the team are depicted as heroes when they pull somebody back from that veil. Zach found it startling. As he moved to become senior resident, being responsible for people being around patients for hours after these experiences. They all told a similar story. On the other side of biological life, it had to do with the typical story you might have seen in the movies, where they saw white light and a sense of expansiveness. But there was this one sentence that came back again and again from patients brought back from the other side. Patients that had no contact with other patients brought back. Every single one of them, their first sentence was always, "Why did you bring me back? Why did you bring me back?" Then as the patients got oriented, the hours that followed, they were telling their loved ones, "I went into this space and there was this bright white light everywhere." In that moment, I felt completely accepted for the first time in my life. That was an unexpected sentence to hear from multiple accounts. I felt completely accepted for the first time in my life. What does one make of this? I think we're walking around lonely as hell. And our opportunity to rebirth, because death is not an end point, it's our transformational moment. It's an expansion beyond the limits of our frail biological shell we carry around. And the instant we step out of that, we find that the universe embraces us in every single second of existence, in complete acceptance of who we are. We are enough. We are enough in and of our own identity. I am. Every second of every point of our existence. It is that disbelief of that is keeping us locked in this conversation we just had. That is myopic conversation in and of itself. Biological diversity is messy. It walks, it crawls, it swims, it swoops, it buzzes. But extinction is silent and has no other voice other than our own. When you back up for a moment and say, okay, so we're killing ourselves. But what if we need a death moment to transform completely, to let go of all the preconceived notions of what it is to be human, and to say, you know what? We're beings of light, and we are completely accepted every moment, including this moment, when we would rape the earth of what we're raping it of, when we would kill each other at the rate we do, when we would destroy the entire ecosystem of a green planet in the middle of a black space, when we would have that level of hubris, we are still completely accepted, and our journey is somehow understood by something more benevolent, more complete than we can see as human beings. So, let's not beat each other up over this issue. Let's not see this as a failure. Let's see this as an obvious next step in our journey. And death is the inevitable thing marching at us that is going to say, are you going to wake up and see the transformation at the moment of death and transformation and say goodbye, Homo sapiens? Or are we going to do it at the moment before that, in the body, before the doctor starts the resuscitation? We are enough. You are enough. I accept you completely. I accept you completely. I want to be with you. I want to live with you. Are you going to say, you know what? What if we look at each other in wonder and awe and said, you're enough. I accept you completely. I want to be with you. I want to live with you. I want to be alive. And if it is with you, it must be on purpose, because we are in the same room, and the odds of that is 0. So here we are. 7 billion of us showed up right now, which is really odd. because I laid out a horrific story of what is happening on the planet, and yet 7 billion of those souls after death are going to realize that they are who they have always been, fully accepted and moving in true love. And that white light is love, and they are in that space. What if we can transform before we die? Then there is no reason to go to Mars. There is no reason to go anywhere else, because we will do absolutely every single thing differently here on Earth, and we're going to do it differently by that simple recognition: I am who I am, you are who you are. That is enough. I accept you completely. Let's figure out how to do this within the design of nature. There is enough energy, there is enough food, there is enough soil, commodities, resources for everybody on this planet to thrive at a level that has never been experienced in human history. This planet came with a set of instructions, but we seem to have misplaced them. Civilization needs a new operating system. We cannot continue any form of human economic systems that have ever existed before and expect us to escape the death moment. We literally have to reinvent everything. We can't save the world by playing by the rules, because the rules have to be changed. Everything needs to change, and it has to start today. Greta Thunberg. If you're under the age of 18, right now you are the last generation that may live to the fullest extent of the human potential. It is you who's being called to transform, because you have showed up right when you did. If my generation is to do anything, it is to say we are going in the wrong direction. But my generation does not have enough time now to turn the vessel around, reinvent everything. When cattle ranchers clear rainforests to raise beef, sell to fast food chains that make hamburgers to sell to Americans who have the highest rate of heart disease in the world and spend the most money per GMP on healthcare, we can easily say that business is no longer developing the world. We have become its predator. So our mission is not to inspire the farmers who are fighting the good fight, but it's to inspire the children to do the right thing and do it differently, connecting to new children who are in the cities or in the tech world, wherever they are, connecting them and giving them a sense of that unity, give them a sense of that oneness, and give us all a sense that this is the inescapable optimism, because we are going to transform, period. And maybe up to the point of our death, or miraculously, it just might happen right before it. Sustainability, ensuring the future of life on Earth, is an infinite game. The endless expression of generosity on behalf of all. Zach had this experience, that you cannot come close to the science of atomic physics or astrophysics of human biology with an overwhelming sense that we are just so far beyond logic. We are so far beyond the material world. We are those entities moving with such power. Can you come to that dawning moment when consciousness expands short of death experience? Can we find ourselves wherewithal, the facility to tap into that sense of what it means to be alive when we are in the present moment? 3 words. Humility first, then gratitude, and love. If we can just practice this at the scientific level, technological level, and on all levels. Thank you for what we have been given. Thank you for the horrendous journey we've had. Thank you for the atrocities we've had to sustain as a people. And thank you for Mother Nature that would continue to be graceful to us. Why does she not let Why does she let her soils recover in 18 months? Grace. Heal faster than we injure. That is grace at the cellular level. Why has she not wiped us off the face of the planet yet? There is 10 to the 31 viruses on the earth. That is 31 zeros after it. Why do they just not knock us out? There is more biological life around us, and we are 1/billionth of the life on this planet. Why has it not wiped us out? Dead center between the smallest thing we have ever known and the largest thing, the universe itself, is human biology. We are the mathematical center point of the universe. We all emanate electromagnetic frequency. Anything does. A rock does. A tree does. Any solid form will resonate an electromagnetic field off of it. If we are the mathematical center point, it has something to do with the fact that everything wants us here. The universe wants us here. The first rule of sustainability is to align with natural forces, or at least not to try to defy them. Our purpose is not to be against nature. We are of nature, and we are at its center point and with great purpose. It has to be that we would have the consciousness, that we would be able to participate on the level of consciousness to understand the concept of humility, gratitude, and love. The one thing we need more than hope is action. Once we start to act, hope is everywhere. Greta Thunberg. Thank you. Thank you for... Thank you for your courage, and thank you for listening to Joe.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Boy. Did that hit you right here? Sure forgot me. We have a few minutes left. I'd like to open up for some Q&A if you would.
Yes.
I recently read that because of exactly what you said, that it would take generations to replenish the soil that we've destroyed. And I'm wondering if you've seen any statistical information on that, of how many years, or would we actually need to go to regions that are undeveloped and find acreage to do it better?
Sure. So I'll direct you to a project called the Farmer's Footprint. And they're underway to regenerative farming, 5 million acres. And the impact on that on our earth is staggering. There are a groundswell, and that's one of them, but that's a really excellent one to go to. And then there's certainly, John Robbins, his work, and there's more current, but Food Revolution Network. So if you go to reclaimtrilogy.com and you go to the partners and resources, you will access a whole wealth of information, both locally, nationally, and international partners in Reclaim Trilogy. So you'll get many, many answers in that regard. Yes?
John, you reference or quote Paul Hawkins a lot. Tell me more about Paul.
Sure. Yeah, Paul Hawkins is an amazing American visionary. He was he was one of the founders of the natural food industry, and he has a wonderful sense of humor. His brand was called Erewhon. And if you take Erewhon and go the other way with it, it means nowhere. Again, on the partners and resources, and this also directs to your question too, it's called Drawdown. It's one of his most recent works, and it's really all the solutions needed to reverse the global climate issue. What Greta is doing, and if those are familiar with Greta, she is waking up millions and millions of people, and the child has spoken, the youth have spoken, and they're speaking in a way that touches all the mothers and fathers on this planet. And our big mother is Mother Earth, that is very sick right now. And in that speech, in that declaration, she does not mince words because it's not necessary. Our own health, we've known how to optimize and prevent all of these diseases in the last 30 years. We've known it for 30 years. The same with climate issues. All the solutions are there. This is why Greta coming forward at this time is divine. It is all beautifully available in such a mystical, magical way, but there is a ground swelling that is now starting to happen. Yes, anyone else?
I heard you mention
Alan.
18 months at the end of your talk.
No, I called out to the 18 years and younger.
No.
Okay.
You mentioned that why
oh, yes, okay.
Why hasn't Mother Earth
Yeah, so right.
And the soil being able to heal itself in an 18 months.
Yes, that's right, exactly. Yeah, so that's grace.
Can you expand on that?
Sure. So it's through regenerative farming, in the practice of regenerative farming, and that's also starting to happen in Austin area in a really wonderful way with people taking on regenerative farming. But in that process, that approach, the soil comes back that is completely being sterilized and has no medicine left, not only for itself but for us. See, there's a lot of layers to this talk. And so the divine order is divine love, divine intelligence, and divine design, right? So when I reference divine, what I'm referencing for myself is that which is greater than all that I know myself to be. That is the creation and the workings of all that works in such, leaves me in awe and wonder. That's what I reference as the divine. And so the divine design, it's so amazing that definition of grace, where we heal faster than we injure, it's amazing that we can come back from cancer, stage 4. We can come back. The earth can come back. So this is me talking, it's my opinion, this is not science-based at this point, what I'm about to say, is that I feel that the divine knew this already in advance, that this kind of grace would have to be present in order for us to be here and continue to be here. I always wondered when my father used to say to me, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And now I understand what that means. That means that humility, the hubris of man, has got us all into trouble. But humility brings us together. Yes?
Did Yanka set up some sort of foundation or something where her work and place would continue to work its mission?
Yes. So Yanka was a single agent, and she She didn't. That's the short answer. The long answer is the ripple effect. I happen to be part of that ripple effect. And there are many young people when I left the nest came. And we also, Yanka, on our 100-acre research farm, because she was married to a world-renowned, and divorced him, but she was married to a world-renowned wildlife biologist. And he's the one that created in Kenya, Nairobi, Africa, the wildlife refuge center that's there. He's a brilliant, brilliant biologist, and way in advance knew these kinds of things that we're now dealing with. And but yeah, she left the ripple effect.
Where is it? Where is it?
Which? Kenya, Nairobi, Africa, yeah. My home in the wildlife refugees, because they spent a lot of time in Kenya, Nairobi before I met the family. Our home was just so much African art and drums and an expression of that culture, which is a beautiful culture. Yes, anyone else? Yes, Kevin.
With the whole movement of the whole plant-based diet, I think the movie Forks Over Knives, and there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
Big movement, and natural eating's grown 20% per year.
Yeah.
So there are some gains being made, for sure.
Yes.
Do you find it frustrating that, you look at Colin Campbell, for example, he's asked about organic. He says, well, they're not, it's not really much different than non-organic food.
Yes.
He's all about taking out meat and dairy.
Sure.
And then, of course, some processed foods like oils and so forth.
Sure.
That they're also talking about the whole plant-based diet.
Yes.
And that's right where you are.
Yes.
We've talked about this a lot.
Right.
But do you find it frustrating that there's that missing piece that they're not necessarily adopting the idea of organic farming, organic foods, and not only non-GMO, no pesticide, more nutrient-rich soil, all that brings. They're not really bringing that into the movement, which has really kind of gone nationwide on some levels.
Yes.
I find that frustrating that that's not kind of being reconciled.
Sure. So the short answer is no. And the reason for that, Kevin, is because what is so amazing and wonderful is that there's people that have dedicated their lives to get us out of this mess. T. Colin Campbell has a certain direction, but there's no confusion with science. Don't get caught up in that there is some sort of misunderstanding. We're not really sure about this and that. It's not true. TrueHealthInitiatives.org. The director is Dr. David Katz. And that's a beautiful, again, that's on the Reclaim Trilogy site, but that's an amazing organization that has scientists united throughout the whole world on what it is to reclaim our health and well-being. John and his son Ocean Robbins, the Food Revolution Network, they have over 500,000 people now in that network online. And they are very cognizant and very put forward organics, non-GMO. Russia taking the position that Russia's just taken. By 2025, they're doing it because of national security issues. And so, so no, I'm not discouraged, because there is a pervasive truth that exists. And there's so many amazing souls like Dr. Dean Ornish, and I could go on and on, of people that are stepping into the space and really helping to educate or share technology, bringing information to us. And that's the reason, by the way, that I created the village, because I understand this, that when you go to try to change, especially diet and lifestyle, it's one of the most difficult things that you can take on. And so the village is about gathering together, building the tribe, being there for each other, educating, and I don't know how many villages that will ultimately open up around the United States and the world, but this is the first one based here in Austin, and it will just find its path, and may it bless many people, and that's the simple purpose behind it.
John, we're running short on time, but on the point of the village, might you just say something about how often the village meet?
Sure.
And where do they meet?
Yeah. So the village is, we meet every week. Thursday at 11:30 in the morning until 1 o'clock. And I host it. We host it at Habitat Hotel, which is what we call the urban sanctuary. So on 3.5 acres, it's hosted there. The first 30 minutes, we come together in a whole plant potluck. The next 30 minutes is education. And the final 30 minutes is the sacred circle, where we gather and support. Beginning this coming Thursday is a 5-part series that is going to be taught by Dr. Farmer, who's present with us, and it's the Alzheimer's solution. And it is the work of a number of amazing people like the Scherzays, who are the world leaders in really having discovered not only can Alzheimer's/dementia be reversed in most cases, but it can also be prevented, most importantly. And that's what will be taught. It's called the Neuro Plan, and that is going to be the 5-part series on that. And all you have to do is you go to Reclaim Trilogy and you go to the village, and then in the village you'll see the village happenings, and click on that. And you might start to wonder why, when you see the village happenings in the Village Voice, I love the 60s. So that's why, and that's also why Rainbow is part of the team with Reclaim Trilogy. It was a revolutionary period, and then we all went off into creative things, and that collection of wonderful souls back then are now emerging today into this groundswelling of movement to change and to make things different. Anyone else?
Okay, well,
thank you.
So much.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Yeah.